Welcome to The Code. Construction, design, and engineering. This is India's #1 construction podcast.
Either you walked 1700 kilometers for architecture. Was there ever a moment where you thought, why am I doing this?
No, I always thought, why am I doing this? That's what kept me going.
Okay.
That was the first walk, 1700. If I did not have the why in sight, I may have felt, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
But why was very much in sight. It was for the longer journey that came after that is why I was doing it. I meant this to be a stepping stone to what I'm doing just now, where I'm working with communities, with the community of designers and the younger designers, more to say, in building an awareness on what else we as a community can come together and do to make a difference.
Why the walk? What brought about the idea?
Yeah, so I took to running when I was 45 and I took this walk up when I was 52. So until 45, I used to play a game maybe off and on in college. I used to do a little bit of physical exercise, but really being maniacal about a physical endurance endeavor was not something that happened till I turned 45, and I started enjoying it a lot. I was also in the space of making a difference within the community of architects, whether it was outside the classroom learning, bridging gaps in education, and so on. And this came as a brainwave at some point as the perfect way to bring the two together.
Yeah.
It was meant to be a campaign that highlighted what we as architects and designers could do to make a difference, but also as a campaign that highlighted what we don't do, that we are not visible enough in the social realm for people to know about us. And I think that was the magic of what this walk was meant to do.
Interesting. You've built platforms like Ethos, Ace Edge, mentored thousands, and literally worked for a cause, right? But are architects even listening?
Oh, I think it's hard not to take me seriously now with crazy adventure under my belt. But no, I think they are. At least the young ones who are, one is those who are just in college, and those that have been part of our alumni, Ethos alumni group, in a sense, that have taken part in something or the other.
Yeah.
They have an affection for their memories with us.
Yeah.
And for sure, they are listening. And I think somewhere, at least when they're in college, there is this sense of idealism that they inculcate. Many of them want to do good, want to do right. It probably gets lost when you're in the practice of trying to build what your career needs to be, how you make money, and so on. It probably gets lost. But while you're in college and while you're in those early years, I think you are listening. So there are many youngsters listening. And of course, all those stalwarts out there who are, running good practices, who have pitched in to participate, to help. Of course, because they have their practices to run, but they also want to make a difference.
Yeah.
And they have participated and collaborated very effectively. So I think there are a good many that are listening, and I'm hoping that number will only grow.
Well, let's hope so. Has architecture in India become a profession of the privileged and those who are detached from the people it's meant to serve?
Absolutely. I think I call designer luxury. We have a vertical that I've started after the walk because of exactly this. It's called Aadhar, affordable designer right, or even access to designer right. When the term roti kapda or makan was coined, makan is what was one of the three essentials that were required for living, not so much health. If you see roti kapda or makan likha gaya tha, not roti kapda or sehat or whatever.
Yeah.
And that I think is not reaching those that need it most. Those who can pay for it are having access to design, but it's really the magnitude of the difference that design can make will be seen and will be perceived and will only when it percolates to the poor, and that's something that's not happening. It's very hard to say that all designers should start designing for free and go and do it for the poor. It's not a practical thing either. But I think it'll be very interesting, and that's something that I hope to make a model of, is where just like healthcare percolates to the poor. You have a rural hospital, you have rural doctors, there is a mandatory 6-month rural internship that doctors have to undergo. There is an Anganwadi worker, there are health workers. During COVID, you saw them, literally going all over the place, creating systems that work. Why can't we have something like that for design? Why don't we have something, I call it a Rachna Mandal. You call them, some kind of local consultants. I know architects will say, how can everybody and anybody give architectural advice? But, like you have paramedics. Can we look at a system of para-architects of sorts who actually dispense local advice? Because sometimes and many of these local contractors are actually construction workers on our construction sites in the city. And then they go into the villages and they become contractors and they're building those structures. So they're actually learning what happens in the city and maybe implementing it to their best ability down there. But if we can actually work with them, train certain locals who understand local environment, local ways of doing things, why people built in the manner that they did, and then advise, that would be really the best way to go. So yes, to answer your first question on whether design has become a space for the privileged, both practice of design has become, certainly you don't see, people like the Sumari I met in Jharkhand, becoming an architect or a construction worker. We do have examples of children of construction workers becoming architects. I know a handful for sure. But even the practice of the profession is not something that is accessible to the poor. Neither is design itself accessible. So on both fronts, yes, it's a luxury just now.
Be honest, how many pairs of shoe did you really have to go through on that 1700 kilometers walk?
On the 1700, so I started with 2 pairs. And I was stupid in the first leg itself. I said, पहले 2-3 दिन मैं पुराने वाले पहन लेती हूँ, उनको घिस लूंगी. And that was a very wrong thing to do because I had trained in the new pairs, right?
Okay.
And then first 2 days, I said, I'll finish this and throw it off. I was being a kanjus, basically. And that created havoc with my Achilles heel. I had the first week, I was in acute pain. If you see videos, you will see a slight limp on the right side as I was walking those 20, 28, 29, 30 kilometers. But I kept at it. So then I had to buy another pair in Ranchi. So I had 3 pairs of shoes. One was meant for the runs, when the time that I was doing running and walking. And I would change after 3 hours, I would change into the walking shoes, after which I would only walk.
How did you pace yourself? How many hours a day?
It was between 25 and 40 kilometers. And if I was only walking, it was about 5.5 kilometers an hour. If I was walking and running, it was about 6.5 kilometers.
That's not bad.
Yeah. So
it's quite a decent pace.
Yeah. You train for it, right? So about 7 hours of in a day is what I would 7 to 8 hours. And the days I did 40, I would choose to walk in the evening as well. Otherwise, I would try and recover for the rest of the day.
Tell me, from architect to change maker, why architecture? Was there ever a defining moment for you?
Well, I would say architecture chose me rather than me choosing architecture in that sense. Although I was exposed to this space because my uncle was a civil engineer. And he worked with the Center for Rural Development in IIT Madras. So whenever I would go for my vacations, I would, be exposed to the field. And then I remember him taking me to show me a low-cost house that he had built. And then he had these books that he had written, papers that he had written. So I was exposed to it. And as a child, I remember in Hyderabad having a lot of brick lying in our garden behind, in the lawn behind. And also a lot of mud. And I remember building with the brick and, small walls. And it seemed very large at that time to me because I was a child. And building with mud walls and getting the feel of it. But architecture wasn't necessarily on my cards. It was more medicine that I wanted to do incidentally. I got into AIIMS as a part of the waiting list 2 months after I got architecture. By then, I was in love with the field, and I think I was in love with the friends that I had, the place I was in. So I think you're very short-sighted at that time, and I was quite happy with the space I was in. But I think I was interested in medicine. I got into Delhi College of Engineering, being one out of a class of 120, one woman in a class of 120 was something that didn't particularly appeal to me. So I chose not to take that up. But I think, I went through certain things in life at that point when I was barely 16, which that's why I said architecture chose me. If I was to live my life again, having seen what I've done with architecture, I would surely choose it again. But at that point in time, it seemed like not my first choice.
Yeah. Interesting. What made you move from practicing architecture to educating and empowering?
The first 5 years were spent in trying to understand what the space was architecture about, this field of architecture was about, and also we had moved to Delhi a few years before I joined architecture. So understanding that as well, coming to terms with a new city after a small town, Hyderabad, that I moved from.
Yeah.
So the first 5 years of student life went in making sense of all this. And the last 6 months, we do an internship. I mean, we do it at different times in different colleges. In my time, in my college, it was the last 6 months of your academic life. And from my third year, I started writing to this prof in the US. And those days were no internet and things like that. So there were long love letters on aerograms and or on white sheets of paper put into airmail envelopes. And this German prof at Carnegie Mellon University, Pittsburgh, Dr. Volker Hartkopf. And he would keep saying there is no provision for a 6-month internship. There's no such thing. And seeing my persistence, he says, okay, just come and I'll see what I can do. So I did my internship at Pittsburgh, 6-month internship. And I think that helped widen my horizons quite a bit. But again, I had given my word that I would come back to India and follow up. So I didn't choose to do a master's. He offered me a seat for master's. I said, no, I'm going back, and actually came back to India, and we moved to Bangalore. And Bangalore, only time I tried working in a regular architect's office was when I was in Bangalore, and I just came out. And I found myself completely uncomfortable. I didn't think I was doing what I wanted to do and what I was meant to do. And hence, of course, I took a training program with the Karnataka State Council for Science and Technology on making mud blocks. Mm-hmm. And they also have a center for application of science and technology to rural areas. So I was involved in all the local methods of construction and techniques, making brick domes and looking at all that with magic and wonder. I actually chose to respond to an advertisement for a creative educationist in slums.
Okay.
I said, maybe, if I have to work in architecture in the regular practice firms, I wasn't very happy. I said, I need to be comfortable with myself, so let me apply for this, even if it meant stepping away from architecture. And this was by an organization called AVAS, Association for Voluntary Action and Services. And they needed an architect. I remember the call with Anita Reddy, who's still a great friend. where she said, "Fantastic, come and meet me." And I joined, and we started working with the slums in Bangalore. So it was not really a shift. I did not get into regular conventional practice. The reason ethos happened actually was because it was by chance that I took these steps and I reached and followed my dream. It was not so much by choice. And I felt I needed to make it by choice for the current generation, working with students, letting them understand what that canvas for them is, where all they can attempt to, follow, what kind of journeys they can follow. And I thought if there was some way of helping them with that, with those making of choices, it would be great. So that's how ethos happened. So it was not really a shift. It was just a way of discovering my path and myself, I think.
Ethos has been around since 2002.
Yeah.
How do you think the Indian architecture student has changed since then?
Well, I think the student hasn't changed as much as the scenario, the problems they face, the gaps that are there, the things that they have to cope with. I mean, in 2002, the issues they had to cope with are very different. If you're talking about 2002, cell phones are just about coming. I remember 2001 getting my first cell phone, and computers and were there. People had started using them, and now you're talking about AI.
Yeah.
So I think it's the environment that they're working in that has changed so much more. The pandemic, for instance, was a huge change, factor for the way kids are today also, because they went through a whole period in their schooling. So I think it's more what environments they face that make them what they are. I remember the first quiz that we held, Arcumen, the first, that's how ethos started. And we used to joke at some point that when you ask kids, what do you read today? They'd say messages, Facebook, DMs and things like that.
Yeah.
And how, a simple thing like a quiz on architecture got them back to the library. There were people who were, actually consulting, reading. Again, now with the internet there, knowledge being so freely available, again, sifting between what makes sense and what doesn't. So I think it's fair to look at it from their perspective. They're constantly having to face these situations and learn. So I don't know if they have changed as much as all that is changing around them. And hence they have to change, because they have to cope. They have to keep up with the times. Yeah.
I have to ask you this. Did your training abroad give you a different lens on Indian architecture?
It certainly widened my perspective hugely. I think the reason I chose some of these paths were also because, interestingly, I mentioned Dr. Volker Hartkopf. He told me there's no fund that I can give you. So you're coming here, you're on your own. But at the end, I think he really felt he should at least pay me for my flight ticket and my, whatever expenses. So he asked me to work on his library. And he said, can you catalog it and put things together? And the kind of information in the books that I saw, the papers that I read, we talked, there were things on Adobe, which so many things that you don't even, come across in necessarily in college, because you're talking about today's way of building usually when you're in college. And then you're learning about these people who have worked in maybe Kenya and various parts of India where they've tried to make a difference. And just because I was putting those books together, and my love for books also probably was nurtured from there as well. And so I think that threw open a whole pathway for me on what I would want to do with myself. And of course, I'd mentioned my uncle's writings also from earlier.
Yeah.
But also, I think very importantly, you realize that your college is not your oyster. The world is your oyster. There's so much out there. And, in my class, it was like doing a semester of masters for me. Although I wasn't recognized as a master's student, but I was taking all their courses, their classes, and all that. There was one person from Taiwan, one person from Korea, one person from Lebanon, one more Indian. So very hardly any American, I think. And, you're learning about their cultures, their life. So yes, for sure, being in the US and working with that team there, Singapore, there was Kipo Lam from Singapore, Majid from Lebanon. So working with all of them certainly, made me a lot more mature a person in terms of being able to, communicate effectively, like you said, understand what else is there in India that we could work with. And I think it made a big difference.
I think one of the best things that such an exposure gives you, especially early on in your life, is that the shell that you've created around yourself, you kind of break away from it.
The ceiling, yeah.
Yeah, if at all there is any, which there is none, but we don't realize.
There's an imaginary, you literally flower, blossom after that, yes.
And what else is a question that keeps on, like it gets etched in your brain. Okay, my experience with the same thing is this person's experience with the same
and you
thing
see
is
there's a
theirs.
different lens altogether, yeah.
And for me, my customs are different and theirs are different. Some of my friends never understood why if there's a book which fell, I'll pick it up and I'll put it to and they would never understand why we did that. There's this Chinese friend of mine, his mother came around and she could not speak English. So, and I did that deliberately where I went and touched her feet. And I told her that, can you please translate and tell her this is why I did that. And now she needs to bless me. And when she heard the explanation, her eyes just went like that.
Right.
She's like, okay, this is beautiful. And it was natural for her to like just take her hands and put it on my head.
Right.
I don't know if she'd ever done that. I don't know if she ever knew that, but it just became a very human instinctive sort of a thing. It's a beautiful experience when we get to meet different cultures. And
I think one thing about India is there are so many cultures and there's so much variety within India yourself, right? So even being able to, within India, I'm saying nobody has to go to the US to get that.
Absolutely.
You can just go from Delhi and say study in Kerala, or from Kerala and study in Ahmedabad, and you break those shackles. I think you also become a lot. There are some fears that you have. Fears of you're awkward, you're shy when you're in college, and you suddenly become a more confident person.
I think that's where you're finding yourself out as well, right? So I want to go back to Walk for Our Cause a little bit. What was your most unforgettable encounters while on the road?
Oh, there was so many. In fact, in the book, 1770 is the book that has this whole story chronicled, and I call them showstoppers. And you wouldn't imagine, someone like an Anjali in Bankura or Bishnupur being called a showstopper, but she's somebody who's standing there and telling me how, she understands that a mud home is cooler in summer and warmer in winter. But when you ask her, how would you build your new home? She says, I will build with modern brick and cement. And I said, why? Because everybody builds. So I said, think about it. And she says, okay, I will think about it. But yeah, so people like that. I mentioned Sumari a little while ago, how with a glitter in her eye, she talks about why she wants to study geography in life as her major. And she says it's because she loves झरना पसंद है, पानी पसंद है, हवा पसंद है, space, अंतरिक्ष में भी पढ़ाया जाता है. And for someone who's actually from the Oraon tribes in Jharkhand, to articulate why she wants to study geography so beautifully is something that moved me immensely. I don't think any of our youngsters in cities will be able to say why they want to study whatever they want to. And I think that's something we as adults, whether parents or teachers or friends, could probably inculcate that sense of understanding, that sense of love for the profession that a child is choosing or longing to choose. Of course, you can change your mind, but at least you know what you're doing. And I think Jharkhand, interestingly, they say Johar, like Namaste jo bolte hain, they say Johar. Johar means I bow to nature, I submit to nature, and that's where probably this girl's love for what she's talking comes about. And what hit me at the time when I was, and I've also discussed this, written about it, also written to the Council of Architecture, and how can we vernacularize learning in architecture?
Interesting.
Right now it's pretty much one size fits all. While the council does not say, again, I'm sure we're going to talk about learning and education also, the rules or the governing body, or whether it is university guidelines or council guidelines, whichever you follow, it does not say do not vernacularize. But it does not say do it also. So most colleges are just following what everybody else does. So how do you contextualize learning is also something that came through very strongly when I heard Sumari. There was these two brothers, Jagjeevan and Vidyapat, that I met in a village called Bharra in Madhya Pradesh. And, complete mud house, 1972. It's already 50, today it'll be 53 years. When I visited, it was about 50 years. Would you call that heritage? Would you call that old? Would you call that a monument? I don't know. 50 years is long enough, I think.
Yeah.
Built by the father and the two sons. Every little, whether it's a window, the charpai, the tiles, everything handmade by them. And charpai ki rassi kahan se aayi? Jungle se. Patte le aate hain, bunte hain, banate hain. And here today we are talking about sustainability. We are talking about, we say cradle to cradle, we talk about reversible architecture, recyclable materials. And this man is saying, Madam ji, jo mitti se bana hai, mitti mein jayega hamara ghar, And that's exactly what we are talking about now in this whole sustainability movement, that it has to go back. And then I think to myself, will Jagjeevan's house get a rating system in the green rating systems anywhere? If he applies for it, will they even consider it? Will it be looked at?
What a question.
So these are things that, and that's the reason some of our verticals came about. I met somebody in the space of a construction worker. And mitti do raha tha, he was just filling. And I said, ban kya raha hai yahan pe? Pata nahi. So many of these people are just building a wall, casting that roof, building a cupboard, not building that temple, building that school, building that church, building that shopping complex. And if they don't know what is being built, फिर वो उसमें प्यार कैसे बोएंगे? How will they make it with total involvement and total love?
Yeah.
And I think it's time we started doing things differently.
Can I tell you the first time I noticed your Instagram? I saw a reel of yours where you asked this lady कि घर कौन डिजाइन करता है?
नक्शा कौन बनाता है?
नक्शा कौन बनाता है? उन्होंने बोला इंजीनियर बनाता है.
जी.
It was such an interesting short which just tells you how the country's other side, where we don't even want to invest any time or attention.
But किसकी गलती है?
गलती किसकी है is a different question.
अगर architect अपने construction workers से बात नहीं करता है, the architect is not conversing with the construction worker. I have asked so many construction workers, नक्शा कौन बनाता है? Architect नहीं आता है वहां से भी.
इंजीनियर आता है.
So अगर आपका जो construction worker है वो नहीं जानता है कि architect नक्शा बना रहा है, then how is, and they can be your ambassadors in society, right? So then you can cry hoarse saying engineers are taking our jobs away and falana, these things are happening, but who is to blame also? And
coming to that, I really want to, actually we are right there. So I think it's pertaining that I discuss this. You posted something recently where you said engineers make it stand, architects make it matter. Let architects be architects. Do you really see a growing overlap between the licentiate engineers and architects? And where is the divide and what's the question here?
There's a conflict for sure, and it's for various reasons. There are state governments which have rules which allow licentiate engineers to build without an architect's sanction up to, I think, 3 floors and things like that. There are these.
Okay.
I mean, that means there's a lack of understanding on what the roles are.
Yeah.
It's not just about making a building stand, like I said, but it's also about what does that building stand for.
Correct.
Right? And if you see our urban fabric, you are seeing quite a mess. Many of the buildings are not designed. They are just built.
Yeah.
Right? And I think it's time we realize that there are these 2 roles. And I think it's important to understand the importance of both these roles. I'm not saying, and licentiate engineers should do engineers bollo.
Yeah.
It's important for them to work in tandem, and it's okay. It's okay. I think each community will feel threatened.
Yeah.
When I say something like this, because you think if engineers are not allowed to design these places, then their income is going to suffer. Similarly, architects, if they allow engineers to, so there is this whole concern that I'm sure is there. But I think it's important to realize. Otherwise, why would you have a 5-year program in architecture, right? It is longer than an engineer's program in a sense. I'm not glorifying either. I'm saying both of them are essential, like I said. But it is a 5-year program in architecture where you're taught to understand space, how to experience space, how the user experiences spaces, how the sun travels, how light travels, how a room can feel different at different times of the day, how a color can impact a space, how a texture can impact a space. How you navigate through a space, how different people navigate through a space, whether they are youngsters, old people, people with disabilities, how women feel.
Yeah.
There are so many things that go into making of a
Within
space,
the design, yeah.
which unfortunately is not taught in engineering classrooms, and that's something we need to take. And whether it is a ground plus 3 building or a huge project, irrespective, these things need to be looked at.
Yeah.
And if they're looked at from the right lens, I think we'll have much better architecture, much better buildings around us.
Have you seen a divide between the fraternity?
Oh, yes. I mean, constantly there are court cases going on where, an engineer is called, has become an architect of a project, and their court has ruled that. So again, it goes back to the Act, Architects Act, where it's incorrect illegal to use the word architect in front of your name if you haven't gone through a BArt program and you're not registered with the council. But it's not illegal to build a building or design a building.
Yeah.
So, and that's where the problem lies. Of course, I have seen, not just seen the conflict, I'm also seeing, we all see what we are seeing, right, around us. I'm not saying all architects are designing fantastic buildings. I'm not even saying that. That also is another debate we have to have.
For another day.
Yeah.
I think the world of engineering also has a lot of issues within itself. One of the biggest problems is that it's not yet a licensed profession as such. They do feel it, especially in the civil engineering realm of it, where civil engineering used to be the most glorified field within the engineering different fields. Now, the fields of engineering have really expanded, and civil engineering somehow is just being taken up as just the last option by people because they can't actually get in because of some strange policies and reasons that do exist that don't really uplift the profession as well. That is one of the biggest challenges within our country. And of course, why you don't see a lot many women in the profession as well. That's another debate and another topic for all day. You worked with thousands of students via ICE Edge. What's the biggest gap between what we teach and what the real world needs, according to you?
I think also the gap between what we teach and what they learn is also something that we could consider. Yeah, so I think even yesterday I was having this discussion with a young architect friend last evening, and then even last week we had a debate on the gap between academia and practice. And there are many firms who say that students that come out are ill prepared, and there are many who say that practicing architects also need to take on some onus to be able to give back and help teach. Because there was one time when I think there was in fact a mandate of sorts where I may be wrong on this, that teaching faculty needed to have a practice of sorts. So they understand what the world of practice is while they're teaching. But I think now it's the visiting faculty that largely bring in the sense of practice. So yes, there is a gap for sure between, because I think in a 5-year architects, we're learning all the time, right? Yeah. And to learn how a hospital project is designed versus a commercial project, I mean, that I think the architect, when he or she takes up the project itself, it's a learning curve for them as well.
Yeah.
So expecting students to be prepped for that is hard. But I have one more young man who's been in touch with me saying, "Ma'am, meko working drawing sikha do." And I haven't managed to pick that up, particularly electrical working drawings. I don't know how to do it. And he's 5 years out of college.
Oh, wow.
Right? So working drawings is something you do in your 3rd year. But I guess conventions change. Electrical fixtures. I mean, in college, it was very interesting. My uncle, the one I told you about, gave me a book on building construction by Barry. And I was at a college the other day in their library. I saw that book by Barry. And he gave me his copy from 1970s, which is just a new edition now. So you are learning something that this person who designed for a not Indian environment.
Yeah.
You're teaching building construction from those books.
Yeah.
Even today.
Yeah.
And I'm talking 35 years ago, I was in college. We studied from that book, and today we are still studying from that book. We need a lot more learning material that is written and designed for our country.
Yeah.
That's one thing. And in terms of the learning gaps, I think it would be interesting to, you look at the internships. I was saying exactly that yesterday, that I don't think they're curated. Okay, this student comes and says, I've got an internship with this ex-architect in Mumbai and I'm going to be spending 6 months there. And at the end of it, they manage to get the certification that's required. They go through the Viva and finish it. But was that journey curated? Was it decided that at the end of 6 months, these are the lessons that would... So practical architecture also, it'll be nice to have a very specific learning module of sorts that goes out. And that is not happening. In fact, we are now going to be doing a kind of a survey to understand from the lens of practicing architects, firms, from the lens of students, and from the lens of faculty, where the problems lie.
Mm-hmm.
And, there are some things that eventually when you realize this is a gap, this can be enhanced in college itself and taught. This, the student can learn on his or her own. And this, yes, we can teach. The firm can teach as part of the internship.
Yeah.
So that's something that we thought we would first do a study of and try and understand. It's a very hard thing to say that you will have a fully well-rounded architect who understands practice when you get out. But the basic gaps should be. And I think the other thing that is important to talk about is that colleges are basically in their curriculum attempting to bring out every one of the architects that come out should be that architect who designs. And I think there is a huge problem.
You think they should radically rethink their curriculum?
I think, extremely important. Because if you believe that, I mean, I am asked even today sometimes, oh, because you couldn't design is what you're doing, you know.
Yeah.
And which is not true. I chose to be this. There are friends who are asked, oh, you couldn't do anything else because, and hence you're writing or you're becoming a photographer. But why can it not be that you need a good eye for design
Yeah.
and hence you can be a good photographer in the space of design? And I think the day we realize that there needs to be equality between all these other disciplines, which strengthen this whole fabric of architecture, design, and space, is when you will probably, otherwise there's a lot of attrition in architecture.
But do you see that equality happening
No, not yet. Not yet.
in the future?
I hope, I certainly hope so, because there are some extremely talented people taking on these alternate roles now. And I
But
think
we are very classist, you know, in our approach towards different professions and how we view them.
true. But at the same time, I think now these people who are making a name for themselves in their respective field are being seen as heroes of sorts.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that you will be allowed to walk those paths. Right now, an internship is meant to tick off those boxes. And it needs to be specifically in the practice of a design and build
Yeah.
segment, which I think is a problem.
Do architects steal interior designers' jobs or projects today?
Yeah. So when I posted this Insta reel about architects and engineers, there was a comment which was pretty glaring and intense, I think, for the person. I think the person was an interior designer. And he started by saying, what about designers? And I said, yeah, I think I thought it was a positive. I said, yeah, we need to widen the net to designers as well. Then he said interior designers. And then he said, you architects kind of are always looking to steal projects from interior designers. And what about us? And it set me thinking on, we've been doing work with the segment of interior designers as well. Whether it is through IIID or through the various competitions that we run for the interior design segment. And one of them has taken us to other countries as well to study what the interior design field is like there. And what was really starkly visible in the entries from the other Asian countries was that their interior design project was actually a whole project of the entire building and its interiors. It was not, interior design or decoration as we call it, as we see it in our country. And there are many architects here today who have stopped using the word interior design and they call it interior architecture.
Yeah.
And when we started looking for participation in this competition to elevate our entry also in interior design to that level, found that there's just a handful of institutions. Many people, so the regulation, so it could be you, I, anybody could actually take on interior design as a profession. Not that they can't take on architecture or anything else, but I'm saying someone who's got no background to it, just
With experience
with
or like,
experience hanging around becomes that designer.
and they do, a bunch of people do, right?
Yeah, and they do well.
Yeah.
But can you imagine what they could do if they actually had
A formal training.
a formal training and a background to it? You know, who when they start understanding the color palette, the color wheel, they start understanding, like I said earlier, what light can do to a place, what texture can do to a place. Again, when you talk about the mess you see around, it's also because of a lack of a coordinated effort within the community of interior designers.
Right.
The fact that there is no regulatory body, the fact that they are the quality of education is also not regulated. There is a 1-year program, there is a 2-year program, there is a 3-year program. Yes, there is some of them give degree,
Yeah.
but all of them are at the same level eventually, right? It's not as if when you graduate, okay, I have a degree, so I might get a certain kind of clientele, but not that someone with a 1-year or a 6-month program does not get to practice. So I think, and then you have these hazardous situations where a fire accident happens on a regular basis and you see, oh, and that's when, we all wake up and say, this was an interior design project. This should have been looked into. This should have been done differently. So I think it's from those perspectives also. I mean, how does someone who's bidding for a job get the job? It's the faith of the client also. And the faith of the client will probably come from the number of projects done, the kind of projects done, the intensity of the depth of information, depth of skill that's there. And you, as interior designers, I think those who are in that space need to equip themselves with all this, to be able to talk confidently, to be able to act confidently, to be able to create confidently. And things will change. I think, and there is no... So that's what this person was trying to tell me, that, you as architects can practice as architects. We as interior designers cannot practice as architects, right? Because it's regulated. But I think it's high time you got together and did something about it as well. So whether architects, the steel interior designers projects, I mean, there's no straight answer because I don't know what is happening out there. But obviously they're getting those projects.
Yeah.
And
it's easier for them.
It's almost like this person was saying, stay to your field so we can get this.
Yeah.
But if they are doing a better job, because I'm not talking about this particular person, but generally there is a poorer sense of quality or delivery.
Correct.
Then people will go to those that are giving them better wares.
That's fair. Do you think young architects are facing a tech overload today?
I think yes. Not just architects. I think all of us are facing that tech overload. And that's the way it's going to be. I mean, when it's very interesting. I attended the Nagpur Lit Fest. And I think Atul Kulkarni, the actor, was the keynote. And he was, one of the ladies in the audience got up and said, my son has started listening to books on Audible and does not read, and that feel of paper, and I feel bad. And he said, hold on, there was a time when there were no books.
Yeah, correct.
It was by word of mouth, stories were passed on.
Correct.
When books came, the same feeling would have been there. Ki paper se pad raha hai. You're losing out on that touch of personal conveyance. And then when books came, the people started reading like crazy, and then you started reading on your Kindle. At least he's listening, reading, so let him be.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, when we were in college, there were no computers, and suddenly computers started happening. We just about started hearing of computers. There was a lab, you went and saw what it was. There were these huge structures and so on. And then things, that time itself, it was considered an invasion. And then you have this period of time where everything is on a computer. Yeah. And I think that's another place where we would like to equip faculty to understand and make sense of this world of tech. So they are able to not just guide them. Guide may be a hard thing to do for a faculty, considering I think kids are a lot more savvy. Yeah. But at least understand their world better. And I think for that, we thought we'll
that'll reduce the gap, or it'll help bridge it. Awesome. Should every architecture student in India spend 6 months living in a village to really understand context?
Yeah. So I think I started when I was talking about the medical profession. I said there is a 6-month rural internship. I'm not sure it's required for them to live in a village, but I would certainly believe in social internships, social, or I would still call it social environmental responsibility.
Maybe we should remove the word social.
Yeah. It should not,
because it gives you a different connotation.
I call it responsible design now.
Absolutely.
So responsible design internships. So it's okay for them to be in a town or a city as long as they're working on a project. Maybe an NGO needs support. And we're going to be doing that. We're going to be giving out around 6 to 12 social internships. Supporting community internships is what I would say, where they're actually working with communities and designing for communities. Now, whether the college allows them or not this time, or I would take on fresh graduates who want to take it on as a fellowship of sorts, is what we're exploring. But I am hoping that some colleges will come forward and allow some of these to happen. But I think it will hold them in great stead. We will have a more conscious community of professionals when these youngsters who go through these kind of programs graduate.
Yeah.
And I think somewhere, even if they're getting into regular mainstream, and I'm hoping that mainstream, the whole definition of mainstream will change as we go along. But even if they're getting into what we call mainstream practice today, I'm hoping that some of what they do in that specific internship will play out in their journey of negotiating with the client for better working conditions or living conditions for the construction worker. Again, negotiating with the client to ensure that designing for universal accessibility is not just ticking off that box saying ramp hai to ho gaya, but ramp ka slope nahi dekha, doesn't matter. We don't talk about fire escapes and things like that people with disabilities need. I don't talk about life cycle design. All these things I think will start changing when there is a more evolved workforce. I think the entire market on products, on the kind of projects that people start awarding, start looking up to will change if you start doing this. And I think
it begins with consciousness first.
Yes.
Do you think is India ready for design thinking to become mainstream, like you said, across industries?
Yes, and I think it started to happen a little bit. It needs to be a huge movement for this to really take off. If you look at when I did the Chennai Bangalore walk, which was focused on accessibility and universal design, there were many companies that we realized that actually are into purple hiring. They have 30% mandatory requirement and when that starts happening, then offices need to be accessible. Their precincts start requiring to be accessible. It's a long way off because looking at the roads and the conditions that we have, you might have individual standalone buildings that are accessible but not really the outside of it. So I think it'll all have to come together. It's a long way off, but I'm hopeful.
Interesting. You recently posted about a Mitti Ka Ghar.
That's
Musean Foundation.
Yeah.
I have a theory that 200 years of colonial thrashing of our mindsets, our history books, they've eradicated what quintessentially was being Indian, and our own methods of approaching day-to-day life and design and building. Our tech is now being adopted by the world, and we seem to be stuck with colonial facades, new age modern materials and technology. But can we still build using mud, lime, bamboo, and no chemicals?
Yeah, that's I think if we had continued to build in that manner, and there had not been this gap, we may have evolved technology to build for high density, high rise, large span, etc. So
I completely agree with
there is this gap that's there, but I still think, there are these, like the Mitti Ka Ghar or Mitti Vanam was another thing we posted about. There are people who are doing these sporadic efforts, and our initiative in the next 1 year is also going to be, how do you bring these to light? And that is why you're seeing some of these posts. building that body of work where people are using our traditional wisdom or ways of doing things. And even if it is evolved, it has to evolve. It can't be that, you're building a 10-story structure. Of course, Nalanda was a 9-story in that sense, built with mud. But, you need to stabilize it. There are other ways. You're talking about 40-story structure. You're talking about 100-story structures now. Whether that's the way to go or not is a different story. But if you're building like that, then how does our local technology fit in there? Is something that, when you start celebrating some of these projects, maybe there will be solutions. I know Revati Kamath, for instance, had talked of building high-rises with, mud as a base material. And you can have a framed structure and build intermediate walls with stabilized mud blocks, for instance. And I know that there are architect friends who do that as well. But, where do you stop? How do you ensure quality when it is a large-scale project? These are all things that need to be explored. So what we're trying to do is build, celebrate these kinds of work, make a repository of it, which then gives it credibility.
Yeah.
And you realize there are more people who want to do it.
It tells people it's possible.
Yeah.
It tells people it's possible sustainably. And different people are doing it.
And there can be more experimentation. There can be more
needs to be
research.
I really do think that we need to look into a lot more inwards than outwards. Do you think architect culture has damaged architecture in India?
So that was to be our next post in the next month sometime.
Oh, is it?
Do one on architecture.
Let's hear it then.
But yes, I think there are many firms who use image consultants who plan their, and I don't think there's anything wrong in that, because you need to, again, like I'm saying, if you're going to celebrate people's work, you need to learn to celebrate your own work as well. But I think there are so many of these, programs these days, which are awards programs and recognitions, which there's so many who've written to me as well that, charges apply kind of a thing. And
I want to tell you a funny story about it once you finish.
Sure. And I think what happens in such cases is there may be people who don't want to pay, who don't believe in that kind of stuff. Two is people who can't afford to pay and who are youngsters, who are still struggling, who, the span of time that it takes for them to become star architects, whatever that might mean, is much longer. And I think if being able to be seen because you're able to bring in a sponsor for a particular, program or whatever is a way of making it happen, then I don't know if you're building the right kind of models. And I think it's important. I mean, I may not be liked for saying this, but role models need to be role models in a wholesome sense of the term.
Absolutely.
And when someone receives an award, and very well that same award has been offered to somebody else at a cost, that it is not really a genuine award, and it makes you sad. Yeah. So I think, yes, it needs to be revisited, and we need to have very different kinds of star architects coming to the.
One of my most favorite human beings, who's an architect, I asked them this, that do they see themselves as a role model for the younger people in his office? And he says, no, I think the best role model is the person who's not trying to be a role model. Mm-hmm. And when he said that, it just really rings a bell. I'm like, okay, this is something that makes sense.
Very straight.
You're not exactly trying to pose yourself as something. Having said that, there was this similar agency which approached me, and I'm not an architect, approached me to submit my project for an award entry just because they saw the podcast. I took someone's project, submitted it.
Wow.
They selected it. They're like, okay, now the fee is 30,000 rupees. And if you pay that, you're going to get this award. If I would have actually gone ahead with it, I think I could have made such a big mockery out of them because it would have been just so funny. And then there are these 40 under 40s and I don't know, 30s under 30s and whatnot. So many. But that's for another day again. Do we have too many architects and too little architecture?
I don't think so. I think, in fact, sometimes I feel we have too little architects. There's so much construction happening and so much construction possible. We just talked about architects not being deployed enough on all kinds of roles. I know, I'll tell you a story from a few years ago. There was this Japanese professor, two of them who had come to Calcutta. And they've talked about some crazy numbers, from 200 colleges offering architecture in Japan or whatever. And I said, really? And they said, when they qualified, saying of that, there were only about 19 of them where you could sign up for a BArch degree and get the license to practice after. They have another exam and whatever that people have to pass. But the rest of them complete, say, for instance, a BA in architecture would become a kind of a visualizer and someone who looks at the interiors and things like that, maybe. Then there is this BSc in architecture who looks at maybe site engineering, estimation. So they're not really architecture colleges, but they are teaching in the field of architecture.
Interesting.
And that's what I said. If we start giving credence and credibility and importance to all the roles that can be played by this class of 40, that's typically one batch, then you would have all 40 of them wanting to stick the course.
The session,
You end up having only 25% in my time, and I believe it's similar today, sticking to the course, and others just going out because everybody is glorifying only that architect. And if you don't document your projects, and who can document better than someone who's probably studied the course? There's so many roles that can be played.
Very interesting. Should Council of Architecture drop BArch as the only entry route, or should there be a lateral pathway?
So there in IIA, through IIA, there is a route. I think you know that, where it's a very hard route. And I think the architects who come through the IIA exam sometimes are tougher than the ones in the regular 5-year program, because these sometimes take 12 years to graduate. They have to work as interns. It's like an apprenticeship program. And it's and the exam. I've seen the papers, the examination papers that, in fact, a couple of them for the initial years I've even set. I used to try to make it easy, but the ones that are for the advanced years, I don't think people who are in the 5-year program will be able to solve some of the questions. So there is that alternate route already. I think they are, because of the new education policy, I think they are looking at other ways. After the 3rd year, if you choose to move on, you can take a specific, not a BArch degree, but I think you can take a BA or BSc. They're trying BSc. I think it will be in architecture, and you can move out. Because right now there's no exit route. In the 5-year program, you get out and you have to be that architect. But if you start having an exit route, then you can actually get out in 3 years. It becomes like a BSc program then, and choose to do a MBA. You could choose to do so many other things after arch. Even today, after BArch, there are others who do MBAs and so on. So I think there needs to be a revisit for sure on this whole thing. I think allowing a lot of cross-disciplinary courses in the first 3 years also is essential, because you kind of start exploring what pathway you want to follow after the 3rd year. The problem will be for the standalone architecture colleges. If it's part of a university where I do 3 years and then I say, okay, the 4th and 5th year, fourth year, maybe I can choose, or I can do a master's somewhere else. Or if I have to do cross-disciplinary courses, I can take a program that's, a course that's part of the civil engineering department, or something that's in the arts or geography department as well. But if I'm a standalone architecture college, I may not have that option. So it's going to be interesting when you start seeing what's likely to happen. But I think it's time. It should happen sooner than later.
Fair. Our Indian city is ugly because of architects or politicians or the people occupying them.
All of it. All of it.
You're failing at all levels?
I think, at many levels. Somebody, a doctor I visited the other day, said, aren't there any rules to stop, open spaces, lung spaces being taken over, lakes being built over? Tell me who can make that happen.
Yeah.
So there has to be
the policy maker.
Yeah. So there has to be some level of culpability from the policymaker side. Then, if you're looking at architects, and for that matter, anybody who builds, I wouldn't say it's only architects who are building. 80% of our structures are not built by architects.
Correct.
Right? So whoever is building is responsible for a lot of the ghettoization and the kind of...
Absolutely. Most of it is built for commercial benefits, but rather than anything else.
Right.
I attended a conference where some of the people were talking about, do we still need to build in today's day and age?
Absolutely. So in fact, the most unsustainable act is that of building.
Yeah.
If you actually see, right?
And then we want to make it sustainable, which is like the other, going the other route. But I don't know. It's always, tickled my brain in the right ways. Okay.
If you actually built like Vidyapat and Jagjeevan, then it's okay to rebuild. It's okay to unbuild and rebuild, and So if you actually do reversible architecture, in fact, we've given design problems to students saying that it's a 20-year lease. This project will be pulled down and something else is going to come here.
Life of a building, yeah.
So how will you build
for 20 years?
For 20 years. What will you do in such a manner that all those things can be dismantled and reused?
Very interesting.
So
that's a good way to think. मिट्टी से है, मिट्टी में चला जाएगा.
मिट्टी का बना है, मिट्टी में जाएगा.
मिट्टी का बना है, मिट्टी में जाएगा. One brutally honest advice to 20-year-old architecture students.
I think, there's so much that you can tell them, but I think get out there, believe that you can be part of the change. I might be sounding very preachy just now when I'm saying these things, but I think I think one very important thing is share. You grow when you share. So share information. I think again the strength is in the collective. We were just talking the other day also how you can actually come together, work together, and grow together is something that I would certainly say. Read, participate outside the classroom in anything and everything that you get a chance to do. Doesn't have to be space related, building related, construction related. It could be, I think there are opportunities there that could open your minds and eyes to so much.
Yeah.
So just see, and I think a day is 24 hours long. There's enough time to do so much. I think we spend, and it's good to have fun. We spend a lot of time talking, chatting. But if you take those talks and chats to places where you can probably engage, again, being a walker and being what I have done, I would believe strongly in interacting, engaging with people, communities, engaging with spaces around you, engaging with that tree, that surface that you feel, touch.
The mark of an architect.
Yeah. It need not even be an architect. It could be a bark of a tree that you're feeling. And actually you'll realize when you close your eyes and feel these surfaces and you're trying to see what it does to you at an emotional level, you'll realize what textures do to you. So, experiencing all this in different places. I remember in college, there was this prof who would make us go under a table, go climb a tree and do different things. And you wonder what he's trying to do,
Perspective.
And you're seeing, different perspectives, different heights, eye levels, maybe constricted space, what it does to you. You talk about that shopkeeper who's actually sitting, that tiny space and has everything around him or her while making that dosa or chapati and selling it out. And sitting there, maybe 12 hours or 14 hours at a stretch. What can you do for someone like that?
Interesting.
You learn. I think it's not just for architects. You said any 20-year-old, so this is something for any 20-year-old. A doctor can figure out why an outbreak of a particular illness happened in an area. Is it because of something in their surroundings, in the way they live? So just talking to people, being with them, and believing that for architecture students or design students that your sight does not end with those four walls.
Fair.
It's actually the canvas is so much more larger.
I want to add to the reading bit a little. Any book that you pick up, which tells you a story, it is set in some sort of a city or some sort of a village, then it describes that place to you so that you get the context of the person that belongs to that place. Whichever story you read, even in the Mahabharata, even in Ramayana, anything that you read, it will set that context from the place and the space that the human or that person is occupying. So architecture is everywhere in each of those books. One of the saddest books that I've read is Lust for Life. And they are telling about these miners who are very right? And when you go through that also, there is architecture there also. That's how it was for them.
Yeah.
The space was just like that for them. So if you actually think about and be a little more conscious, I think architecture is everywhere in whatever you read.
True.
Probably that's why, a lot of professors also say, read anything but just read. All right, next question. And this is going to be a short, fast answers, right?
Okay.
Design competitions in India, first thought that comes to your mind.
Too many.
All right. Ace Edge in one word.
Ethos of learning.
Okay.
It's a phrase, not one word.
Fair. Most overrated material in architecture.
Overrated material.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can come up with two.
I am not in practice, but I don't want to offend anybody.
It's okay. But if you would like to, then go ahead. This is the moment. Favorite Indian architect other than B.V. Doshi?
Well, I may not have said that, but although Didi Contractor is not an architect, I kind of am fond of her.
Very nice. She's her age right now, by the way.
She passed away since then.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I was to go and stay with her for a little bit, but that never happened.
Oh,
Yeah.
that would have been an experience. One thing architects should stop doing immediately.
Maybe, stop thinking out of the context, but think contextually.
Okay.
Think local. Yeah.
Interesting. Studio or site?
Site for sure for me. Studio on the site, maybe.
Studio on the site. Very nice. Concrete or clay?
Personally, clay.
Okay. You wanted to add something to it?
No, personally clay, but concrete can be lime concrete. It can be stabilized concrete. There are various ways in which, depending on what you're doing. Yeah.
Heritage or futuristic?
Heritage, again, depends on how you define it. I have strong feelings about what we call monuments.
Okay.
I believe monuments are the day-to-day monuments that people live in, and I'd like to celebrate them over what we call heritage otherwise.
Although I know the answer to the next one, but I still would like to ask you, work alone or collaborate? Which one do you enjoy?
Collaborate for sure. Yeah.
Okay, this is wildly weird, this question that I wrote down, and I'm still going to ask you this. Kolhapuri chappals or Nike for walking 1700 kilometers?
I don't use Nike, but but yeah, shoes for sure.
Yeah. Do you think you should have gotten like a brand deal for the walk?
Unfortunately, nobody gave me that.
You should have. It's not a small.
I hope my next walk they will, thanks to you. But
Yeah, they should. If anybody is listening,
Yeah.
come on. And you walk 1700 kilometers? Come on, man.
thanks, Rishabh.
Can you share a funny or embarrassing moment as an educator or as an architect? Something that you still like think about and just have a nice laugh with.
Embarrassing moment. Yeah, I can tell you about.
Have you ever forgotten like to bring your own presentation to?
No. I'll tell you worse. Arcumen, first edition of Arcumen, the quiz. Ethos has this earthy tone, which is the golden logo colors that. So the entire backdrop was designed in that golden tone.
Okay.
And calling the guy, abhi aa raha hai, paunch raha hai. And those days, I was doing all this myself, personally. And then the stage gets set up and the entire backdrop is in a mithai pink magenta. I freaked out. I said, what is this? And if you see the videos of that day, I'm smiling hugely, but I know the anger I felt within. But looking back, it's a bit like that color behind you. But looking back, it looked great at the end of it. It can look really fabulous.
Okay.
But it was just the wrong color completely.
Sometimes these things have a good way of happening.
So nobody in the audience or anybody knows, what really happens behind the scenes. But there's a lot of tamasha happening. Yes, really did.
Did you ever get lost like on your walk and thought, okay?
Oh yes, I did a few times. And when you get lost, you're walking that much more because the distance is the start and end points are the same, but it means you're going around a lot more. I write about it in the book also. There was one particular episode where I was reaching Renukot. And that was the day of the elections in Uttar Pradesh, election results in Uttar Pradesh. By chance, I was wearing a orange bandana that day.
Yeah.
And everybody was, because it was BJP had won, and everybody thought I was bhaichara kind of a thing. So they were waving and major tamasha happening, but all internet lines were paused for a little while. And there was a huge traffic jam. So the car and the bike that was trailing did not manage to find me.
Oh God.
And I took a route which was a pedestrian route, thinking nikal jayenge. And I walked and walked and walked alone in that entire, it was about 10, 12 kilometers, about 2 hours, not a soul, because this was through a area where train tracks were being laid. So there was nobody, no work happening that day. There was no tree, no rest place for me to sit and take a break. I didn't carry water because it was all in the car. Oh, I was quite a mess. And honestly, if harm had to happen, it could have been that day and nobody would even have known.
Yeah.
Then the railway tracks I knew would reach somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? So I started walking along the railway track, even though they were partly constructed. And I reached the Renukut station.
Oh.
And my team was watching me from above. At some point, they started seeing me.
Oh.
And then they came down and got me water and took me out of there. But yes, that was one hard, not really scary. Dar to nahi tha. Fortunately, I didn't see a bad side. I mean, as a woman in a city, in a town, one has seen a lot happen.
Yeah.
But on this walk, I saw only the good side of India. Surprisingly. Nowhere, no village. There was one kid who tried to act smart. He pretended कि गाड़ी धो रहा था, कि गलती से pipe का पानी मेरे ऊपर आ गया, kind of a thing. But that was part of the fun, and I also kind of looked at him, laughed, and kept walking. But I didn't see anything touch wood. Whether I was alone, we were in strange places, staying in strange places.
Did that change some? Did that give India a different place in your mind?
Yes, it did. We tend to paint. Of course, I know there's a lot of bad out there, without a doubt.
Yeah.
But I think that's true of any place. People are the same everywhere. There are those shades everywhere. And I think what worked also was that I used to walk at hours in the morning where the goons were sleeping, maybe. So I would wake up at 3 when they would probably have just gone to sleep.
Yeah.
And and I would walk till about noon. Then I would have my interactions. By about 2:30, we were in the comforts of our room. But even in a if someone wanted to, they know you're staying in a place like this, there could be things that could happen. But fortunately, it was all very good experiences. I remember talking to people along the way, and it's also, we talk of sheer poverty, we talk of a lot of, and I expected to encounter a lot of that. Maybe it was the route that I took, maybe it was, I didn't go too much into the interiors to face that, but generally people seemed quite santusht, as they called themselves.
Yeah. Did you have many interactions?
Plenty, every day.
Yeah.
Every day I would be chatting and talking to people.
What was your favorite one?
I mentioned a few, which were really, really, really deep, but there was this 90-year-old lady, I think 90 years at least, Jashoda in Rajasthan, who seemed like pata nahi kis janam ka rishta hai. She came and hugged and beti sukhi raho and things like that. What's really funny is most of these people, when you ask them, 50 hoga Umar, now we are 50 years old. Then I say, what is my age? I ask them. So then, but they say, Aadhaar mein itna hi diya hai. So in their cards, that's all, that's how old they are.
Of course.
And there was another very interesting interaction in Odisha. There was this lady who, later she said, I was scared of you. Who is this woman coming and talking to me?
Oh.
And so she was giving me all wrong information about her age, about her name, everything's wrong. And then when, you really got, she got friendly, then I said, then her son came and all. She said, I was scared. I didn't know who you are, what you have come for, And there was one woman I remember in Madhya Pradesh again, who refused to believe I was walking. She said, ho hi nahi sakta.
Oh, Baba.
And then one guy, in fact, you should hear this, one guy who was related to her came and said, ये Facebook, Insta पे influencer होते ना, वैसा है madam. China से आई है, is what he said. So imagine they don't even know what India is, China is, and they're talking about that. But they were talking about influencers doing these walks just to get their...
Interesting.
So they knew that.
It's good colors you saw.
Yeah.
So such a... let's come back to architecture. If you had a magic wand and could fix one thing about our built environment today, what would it be?
I wish I could actually, while they say there is a lot of order in the chaos, I don't see any order in our chaos.
Yeah.
I think it would be great to fix our infrastructure to start with. The urban infrastructure, you see, I'm living in Bangalore just now, and the footpaths, there are hardly any, the potholes, the roads.
Is the water problem for real there?
Well, I believe, in the community that I'm in, they're unfortunately buying water. But that was largely that last year. I don't think it's something that's there to stay, and at least I'm hoping it's not. But coming back, I think if I could just wave a wand to clear up that mess. For instance, on the footpaths, they have these, in Indranagar also, they have these ramps that allow for a wheelchair to go up and come down. But then they have these bollards because bikes are taking over the footpath. So then there is no way a wheelchair can go through. It's crazy. So if I think the infrastructure would be great to first clean up, then we could get to the buildings.
Do you think instead of like these political ads or these brand ads at all these public places like metro stations, we rather have ads teaching people civic duties?
Absolutely. I think it would also be nice to give out awards, because...
So to model citizens, ideal citizens?
Yes, I had this opportunity to be a jury for a toilet beauty contest in a village.
Okay.
We often say, villagers don't use their toilets. बना के दो कमरा बना देते हैं.
Correct.
And this kind of made them want to use the toilet, because there was this whole contest around a toilet where we were the inspection team that went and saw how they're maintaining it, how they're keeping it clean, what they have done. They had messages on sanitation on their walls. They had किसने hook लगाया है तौलिया के लिए, who's got a soap dish.
मैम मेरे गोदाम में लेबर नहीं जाती वॉशरूम्स में, मैंने बनाए हुए हैं, सीढ़ी चढ़ के ऊपर जाना होता है. So they rather go out and there is a plot and they'll be outside. That's easier for them, which is something I just cannot understand. और वो मैंने try कर लिया. It's not with gussa that I can do anything. It's not with reason that I can win.
But maybe if you have a incentive like this.
How? What?
ये toilet beauty contest में बोल रहे, it did actually work, because that whole village in Kameshwaram was kind of using their toilets. That's another thing. Public, you said warned with what and all that. If we could, there are so many villages that I walked through where they were, I had to use the roadside myself. So
because of no facilities.
Yeah.
What's your ultimate vision for the design fraternity within India, or collaborations, or how our fabric should look like within?
I think we need to look at, I said this earlier also, mainstreaming responsible ways of designing. How what we call alternate today actually becomes mainstream. I mean also in terms of alternate materials, methods. They've been alternate since I was in college, yeah. When will they ever become mainstream? How long will you continue to do that? Alternate practices we talk about, and we have panel discussions on alternate practices, alternate ways of learning. It'll be great to see them becoming mainstream. We are talking, you also mentioned the gap between academics and practice. How though that kind of gets bridged. It'll be lovely to see a changed.
What is next for you after Ethos, ESEDGE, work for Argos?
So Ethos, the way it was, is already handed over to my team, so it's not mine anymore. But Ethos Foundation and ESEDGE are. ESEDGE is going to be hosting a host of initiatives and programs for faculty and young learners, and even old learners, because learning is really lifelong.
Yeah.
But with a difference, we're also doing some surveys to understand what those gaps are. Even with faculty, what kind of empowerment they are seeking, and then pursuing that.
Okay.
We are, like I mentioned, we are looking at career paths in responsibility and responsible career paths, and also celebrating them, like I said. So you're going to see a lot of accolades and awards that would be very different, hopefully.
Yeah.
I think different kinds of recognition at different levels need to happen. One is, of course, on social media, that one has been doing, but I think it needs to be a lot larger than that. So we'll have to see if there's going to be media that can start covering certain kinds of practices, bringing those to limelight, so that there is this whole shift where people realize that design is about solving problems and not just about aesthetics. And that needs to change. Yeah. There's a long 1 year ahead. I'm very excited.
That's good. Nervous?
Not at all.
Right. Complete this sentence. The future of architecture in India is dash.
I wish I could say full of hope. But yes, I'll say full of hope. Let's see. But
Okay.
or you can actually say, I wish I could say full of hope.
Interesting. Quote to live by. Your quote, which you live by.
At this point, there are two that I can share. One is work is worship. I have never been able to sit and find that solace in just sitting and staring that many people do find solace in. I just have to be that doer. The other thing that this walk has kind of taught me is that the journey is the destination. So
Lovely.
that's
Very
something
nice.
that I like.
Gita, I think we've had a fun conversation. We covered a lot of aspects of what you do, contemporary, what India in terms of design has been. And through your lens, I actually got to see India, and through your Instagram as well. Been a fan for, I think, close to a year that I've been following you. So thank you for the time that you've given us today.
Thanks, Vishal.
I hope I was able to do some sort of a justification or just justice to the time that you've given us. And so this episode should be out very soon. And it was a pleasure.
Thanks, Rishabh. I think I enjoyed a lot of it. I think the conversation brought in certain expressions that maybe I articulated on the go, and it's something that maybe you got me thinking on as well. Thank you
I
so
think
much.
it was fun. Thank you. This was architect Geeta Balakrishnan, and I am Rishabh Agrawal, and this is The Code. If you have any questions for her, write to us at India's #1 construction podcast @gmail.com. You can reach me on Instagram as well at India's #1 construction podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great day.